Hi, welcome to Conflict Story, where we bring you the best and most fascinating stories just for you. Let's dive right into one of those stories. It begins like this.
I never imagined that living peacefully on my own land would lead me into a bizarre confrontation with a homeowners association I never agreed to join. My name is Alex Carter, and I'm a 42-year-old architect who treasures the quiet life on my 30-acre property in Blue Ridge, Virginia. This estate has been in my family for nearly 80 years. My grandfather built the main house, a charming stone structure with a wraparound porch, and over the decades, we've added a small guest cottage, a greenhouse, and several outbuildings for storage and hobbies. 5 years ago, a housing development sprouted on a neighboring tract of land. They called it Whispering Pines, and it quickly filled with identical houses, each painted in muted pastel shades. The residents seemed friendly enough at first, and I thought little about the homeowners association that came with it. As long as they stayed on their side of the property line, I had no issue with them. But things took an unexpected turn one crisp October morning. I was inspecting my fences, a routine task before the start of winter, when I heard a voice calling out behind me. "Excuse me, sir!" Turning around, I saw a woman in her late 40s striding purposefully toward me. She wore a bright red windbreaker, and her blonde bob swayed with her brisk pace. In her hand was a clipboard, her expression as sharp as the morning chill. "Good morning," I said cautiously, unsure of her intent. "I'm Amanda Brooks, president of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association," she announced, extending her hand. Reluctantly, I shook it. "Alex Carter," I replied, tilting my head slightly. "How can I help you?" Amanda's smile was tight. "We need to discuss some violations on your property," she began, glancing down at her clipboard. "Your grass is far too long, and the trees overhanging the road are a hazard. Also, we've noticed several unapproved structures on the premises." I blinked, momentarily speechless. "Violations?" I repeated. "I think there's been a mistake. This property isn't part of your development. It's private land." Amanda's smile faded, replaced by a look of practiced patience. "Mr. Carter, all properties within Whispering Pines are subject to our homeowner association guidelines. We take community standards very seriously." I suppressed a sigh. "This estate predates your development by decades. It's not part of Whispering Pines, nor am I a member of your homeowner association." Her eyes narrowed. "That can't be right. I can see your house from the road. Surely it's within our boundaries." "It's not," I said firmly. "You're welcome to check the county records." Amanda's lips pressed into a thin line. "If that's true, then I suggest you bring your property into compliance voluntarily. Overgrown grass and unmaintained trees can lower the property values for everyone." Her tone was dripping with condescension, and I felt my temper flare. "Ms. Brooks," I said evenly, "your association has no jurisdiction here. If you'll excuse me, I have work to do." As I turned to leave, Amanda called after me. "This isn't over, Mr. Carter. The homeowner association will be following up." I shook my head, muttering under my breath. Little did I know just how persistent she would be. Over the next week, Amanda made her presence known. She left printed notices in my mailbox, each citing a supposed violation of Whispering Pines bylaws. Then came the complaints to the county, which led to an inspector showing up at my door. Thankfully, the inspector quickly confirmed that my property was fully compliant and had no ties to Whispering Pines. Still, the disruption was infuriating. One morning, I stepped out to retrieve my mail and caught Amanda's SUV idling at the edge of my driveway. She was holding her phone, clearly taking pictures of my house. I strode over, forcing myself to remain calm. "Amanda," I said firmly, "what are you doing?" She didn't even flinch. "Documenting the violations," she replied coolly. "Violations of what?" I snapped. "I've already told you. This is private property. You have no authority here. Stop harassing me." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "We'll see what the county has to say about that." I stepped back, crossing my arms. "Fine, call them again if you want. But if you set foot on my property, I'll report you for trespassing." Amanda's expression darkened, but she said nothing more. She drove off, leaving me with a sinking feeling that this was far from over. Later that week, I received a call from a friend at the county office. "Alex," he said, "we've received multiple complaints about your property. They're clearly unfounded, but whoever's filing them is persistent." I sighed. "It's the homeowner association president next door. She's convinced she has authority over my land. My friend chuckled sympathetically. Sounds like a real piece of work. Let us know if it escalates. We'll back you up. I thanked him and hung up, my mind racing. Amanda's actions were getting out of hand, and I couldn't help but wonder what she would try next. As I went to bed that night, I resolved to stand my ground. This was my home, my family's legacy, and I wouldn't let a power-hungry homeowner association president push me around. Whatever Amanda had planned, I was ready for it, or so I thought. The days following Amanda's latest antics were unusually quiet, but I knew better than to let my guard down. She was far too determined to let this go, and sure enough, trouble was brewing just beyond my property line. It was a brisk Thursday morning when the peace of my estate was shattered by the roar of engines. I stepped outside and saw two large trucks parked near the entrance to my driveway. Men in uniforms, landscapers by the look of them, were unloading equipment and marking areas with bright orange flags. I approached, my frustration mounting with every step. "What's going on here?" I called out. One of the workers, a middle-aged man with a clipboard, turned to face me. "Morning, sir. We're here to conduct landscaping work per the request of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association." I stared at him in disbelief. "Excuse me, this is private property. Who authorized this?" The man glanced at his clipboard, then gestured to a sleek black SUV parked nearby. "You'll want to speak with Mrs. Brooks. She's overseeing the project." Suppressing a groan, I marched over to the SUV. Amanda was leaning against the door, a self-satisfied smile plastered across her face. "Amanda," I began sharply, "what is this?" She didn't flinch. "Good morning, Mr. Carter. We're simply helping you bring your property into compliance with community standards. You should be thanking me." My jaw tightened. "I didn't ask for this, and I don't need your help. Call your crew off immediately." Amanda's smile faded slightly. "Now, Alex, there's no need to be difficult. The association is merely ensuring that your property meets acceptable standards. Overgrown grass and untrimmed trees reflect poorly on all of us." "Amanda, this is trespassing," I said firmly. "You and your crew have no right to be here. Leave now or I'll call the police." Her expression hardened. "You wouldn't dare. The homeowner association has every right to enforce its guidelines, and if you're unwilling to cooperate, we'll escalate this matter to the county." I pulled out my phone and began dialing. "Try me." Amanda's confidence faltered as she watched me place the call. Within minutes, a patrol car pulled up, and Officer Lucas Harris stepped out. He'd been by before, and I was relieved to see a familiar face. "Morning, Alex," Lucas said as he approached. "What's going on here?" Before I could respond, Amanda interjected. "Officer, I'm Amanda Brooks, president of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association. We're conducting necessary landscaping work on this property to ensure compliance with community standards." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "On private property, that isn't part of your association?" Amanda's cheeks flushed. "Well, there's been some confusion about the boundaries, but—" "There's no confusion," I cut in. "This property isn't part of Whispering Pines, and I've told her that multiple times. She's trespassing." Lucas nodded. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you and your crew to leave. If Mr. Carter's property isn't within your jurisdiction, you have no authority here." Amanda opened her mouth to argue, but seemed to think better of it. She turned to the landscapers, who were standing awkwardly nearby. "Pack it up," she snapped. "We're leaving." As the trucks pulled away, Lucas turned back to me. "Sorry about that, Alex. Let us know if she tries anything like this again." "Thanks, Lucas," I said, grateful for his help. But even as I watched Amanda drive off, I knew this wasn't the end. She had crossed a line, and I had no doubt she'd try again. It was time to take action. That evening, I reached out to an attorney specializing in property rights. Sandra Martinez was sharp, no nonsense, and came highly recommended. "Alex," she said after I explained the situation, "what Amanda's doing is not only harassment, but potentially criminal. We need to send a clear message that her behavior won't be tolerated." Over the next few days, Sandra and I gathered all the evidence we could: photos, videos, and witness statements from neighbors who had seen Amanda's crew on my property. We also compiled records proving my estate's boundaries and its exemption from Whispering Pines. Sandra drafted a formal cease and desist letter, which we delivered to Amanda via certified mail. The letter outlined her repeated violations and warned of legal action if she continued her harassment. I hoped that would be enough to deter her, but Amanda wasn't one to back down easily. When she responded, it wasn't with an apology, but with a smug letter from the Homeowner Association's attorney, claiming they were within their rights to enforce community standards. It was clear that this was only the beginning of a much larger battle, one that would test my patience and resolve. But I wasn't about to let Amanda and her homeowner association trample over my rights. If she wanted a fight, I was ready to give her one. Amanda's refusal to back down set the stage for a tense and escalating conflict. Despite the cease and desist letter, she continued her campaign, finding new and increasingly petty ways to interfere with my life. Notes started appearing in my mailbox, unsigned but unmistakably from her, citing imaginary violations and thinly veiled threats about potential legal consequences. I ignored them, but the frustration was starting to wear on me. One Saturday morning, I stepped outside to find a new surprise. A for sale sign staked into the ground at the edge of my driveway. It was the kind used by Whispering Pines' real estate agents, complete with their logo and Amanda's name as the contact. Fuming, I yanked the sign out of the ground and marched over to Whispering Pines. It wasn't hard to find Amanda's house. Her oversized SUV with the Homeowner Association President sticker on the rear window was parked in the driveway. I rang the doorbell and waited, my grip tightening on the sign. Amanda answered the door, her expression shifting from surprise to feigned politeness. "Mr. Carter," she said, folding her arms. "What brings you here?" I held up the sign. "Care to explain why this was on my property?" Her smile didn't waver. "Oh, I thought you might be interested in selling. With the current market, you could make a great profit and find something more suitable elsewhere." I stared at her in disbelief. "You don't get to decide what's suitable for me. Keep your signs off my land, or I'll have you charged with trespassing." Her smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "I'm only trying to help, Alex. Whispering Pines has standards, and it's my duty to ensure our neighborhood reflects those." I took a deep breath, my voice dangerously calm. "This is the last time I'm asking nicely. Stay off my property and stop trying to impose your rules where they don't apply. If this continues, you'll leave me no choice but to escalate." Amanda's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing as I turned and walked away, the sign still clutched in my hand. I knew she wasn't going to stop, but I was done playing defense. It was time to take the fight to her. Back at my house, I called Sandra and explained the latest incident. "She's not just harassing me anymore," I said. "She's trying to intimidate me into leaving." Sandra sighed. "This isn't surprising, but it's good that we're documenting everything. The more evidence we have, the stronger our case will be. Let's file a formal complaint for harassment and pursue damages." Over the next week, Sandra and I worked to strengthen our case. We gathered statements from neighbors who had witnessed Amanda's behavior, including one resident who had overheard her bragging about her plans for my property. We also uncovered records showing that Amanda had a history of overstepping her authority as homeowner association president, including disputes with other residents who had dared to challenge her. Meanwhile, Amanda's antics continued. One afternoon, I caught her taking pictures of my property from the road, her phone aimed directly at my house. Another time, I found a landscaper on my property claiming he'd been hired to clean things up. Each time, I confronted her directly, making it clear that her behavior was unacceptable. The breaking point came when I returned home one evening to find a letter taped to my door. It was an official-looking document, complete with the Whispering Pines Homeowner Association letterhead, stating that I had been fined $1,000 for failure to maintain acceptable property standards. It was laughable but also infuriating. The next morning, I marched into the county clerk's office with the letter in hand. The clerk, a kind woman named Jean, took one look at it and shook her head. "This isn't valid," she said. "The homeowner association has no authority over your property. You should report this to the authorities." That's exactly what I did. I filed a formal complaint against Amanda and the Whispering Pines Homeowner Association for harassment, trespassing, and fraud. Sandra followed up with a lawsuit demanding damages and an injunction to prevent Amanda from interfering with my property again. The legal battle that followed was intense. Amanda's lawyers tried to argue that her actions were justified, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. The fake fine, the forged documents, the trespassing incidents. It all painted a clear picture of a woman who had abused her power in a misguided attempt to control something that was never hers to begin with. When the court finally ruled in my favor, it was a huge relief. Amanda was ordered to pay damages, and the homeowner association was slapped with additional penalties for failing to rein in their overzealous president. But the victory was bittersweet. While justice had been served, the months of stress and frustration had taken their toll. As I walked out of the courthouse that day, Sandra turned to me with a smile. "You did the right thing, Alex. This sets a precedent for others dealing with similar situations." I nodded, feeling a sense of closure. Amanda's reign of terror was over, and my property was finally mine again, free from her meddling. But even as I returned to the peace of my estate, I couldn't help but wonder how many others had suffered under her rule, and how far she might have gone if no one had stood up to her. The court's ruling marked the beginning of a new chapter, but it wasn't the end of the story. As news of the case spread, it became a local sensation. People from nearby neighborhoods began reaching out, sharing their own tales of overreach and harassment by homeowners associations. Amanda's actions weren't just an isolated incident. They were part of a larger pattern of unchecked authority. For a time, I enjoyed the peace that came with knowing Amanda and the homeowner association had been legally restrained from interfering with my property. The cease and desist order prohibited them from further contact, and the damages they paid allowed me to restore my estate and cover legal fees. But Amanda wasn't one to admit defeat quietly. A few weeks after the trial, I was walking my property when I noticed something odd near the edge of the forest. A series of small, handwritten signs staked into the ground. Each one bore a message like, "Eyesore," or "Sell now." It was childish and petty, but the handwriting was unmistakably Amanda's. I took photos and removed the signs, documenting everything for Sandra. "She's violating the court order," Sandra said firmly. "We'll notify the authorities immediately." Amanda's behavior led to another court appearance, this time resulting in harsher penalties. The judge extended the injunction and imposed a hefty fine, warning Amanda that any further violations could lead to jail time. Her defeat was complete, but the damage she'd caused to her reputation in her community lingered. Meanwhile, the Whispering Pines Homeowner Association underwent a significant transformation. Following the trial, the other board members distanced themselves from Amanda, claiming they had been unaware of her actions. Whether or not that was true, they quickly moved to replace her as president. The new leadership focused on rebuilding trust within the community, promising greater transparency and fairness in their dealings. I was skeptical at first, but over time I saw real changes. The passive-aggressive notices stopped, and residents began reaching out to me, not with complaints, but with invitations. One family invited me to their block party, and another offered to help with my garden. It was a stark contrast to the hostility I'd faced before, and I began to feel a sense of connection to the neighborhood that had once been my adversary. Months later, I received an unexpected visit. Amanda herself stood at my gate, looking far different from the confident, domineering woman I'd first met. She appeared tired and subdued, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. "Mr. Carter," she began, her voice hesitant, "I know I'm the last person you want to see, but I needed to apologize. I let my position go to my head. I was wrong to treat you the way I did." I studied her for a moment, searching for any sign of insincerity. All I saw was regret. "Thank you, Amanda," I said finally. "I hope this experience has taught you something." She nodded. "It has. I've stepped away from the homeowner association entirely. I need to focus on rebuilding my life and making amends." It wasn't the resolution I'd expected, but it was a step toward closure. As Amanda walked away, I felt a sense of relief, as if a long-standing weight had been lifted. The changes in Whispering Pines continued to ripple outward. The Homeowner Association's new board implemented reforms, eliminating many of the arbitrary rules that had caused tension. They prioritized community events and open dialogue, fostering a sense of unity that had been missing for years. As for me, I found unexpected allies among my neighbors. We worked together on shared projects, like clearing trails and organizing charity drives. The animosity that Amanda had sown was replaced by cooperation and goodwill. Reflecting on the experience, I realized that standing my ground had been about more than protecting my property. It had been about drawing a line against unchecked authority and proving that one voice can make a difference. My estate remained my sanctuary, but it was no longer isolated. Instead, it had become a part of a community that was stronger for the challenges we'd face together. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow.